As honey attracts flies, so did the online social networks that emerged in the first decade of the 21st century. Millions and eventually billions of accounts were created on competing networks. No one knew how many of them were real. For some of us, these networks were like vinegar. We were uninterested in trying them. My teenage daughter Susie, on the other hand, couldn't wait to join them, and my wife Tricia signed her request shortly after her 13th birthday. I wasn't too happy about it, but Tricia was a great mom and usually made the right decisions. A few weeks went by, and one day at dinner, Susie asked if Tricia and I wanted to join in too. "Sure, honey." "That sounds like fun," Tricia said. "Thanks, not me," I replied, hoping that would be the end of it. Susie wasn't done yet, insisting that we both participate. "This is a lot of fun, Daddy. You get to see what all your friends are doing, and there are lots of games to play. Honey, I communicate with my friends either in person or on the phone. I don't have to go to a website for that. And we have plenty of games in our house if I want to play something." "Daddy, what about Aunt Linda? When was the last time you talked to her?" "Oh," I said, wincing, trying to remember when. "A couple weeks ago, I think." "And you know she bought a new car?" "6 weeks ago? It's red and it looks really cool." "Beth," her cousin, "is getting Aunt Linda's old car when she gets her license in a few months." "You're friends with Aunt Linda? And she has a new car?" I was a little surprised, thinking her old car wasn't that old. Tricia nodded, smirking at that surprise and at my expression, though it was partly due to the horrible thought of my niece driving on real roads and not the parking lot of their church. "Yeah," Susie replied, looking at me like I was crazy since I didn't know. "I told you should join." Tricia and I talked about it that night. I guess I shouldn't have been too surprised when Tricia sided with Susie, especially since she had already given our girl permission to join and agreed to her own account. Tricia told me, she's probably right. It might be a good way to keep in touch with our relatives and some of our old high school and college friends. "I'm not sure I'd want to keep in touch with many of them," I muttered. I already kept in touch with my best male friends. With girls, it was different. Most of the girls in high school treated me either like dirt or a brother, usually an immature junior, and most of the thousands of female students in college simply ignored me. Of course, there were exceptions at such a large school, and things improved, at least to some extent, as I went through school. I had a few college girlfriends and even a couple ex-girlfriends from my junior and senior years. So we decided to give it a try, although secretly, my main reason was to keep an eye on Susie's online activities. I had heard that many people were trying to take advantage of young girls, and I was determined not to let that happen to my daughter. I kept a close eye on Susie's account and, to my delight, made sure she was quite sensible, just as we had raised her to be. Eventually, feeling better about her activities, I spent some time finding and reconnecting with old friends, but I was very careful to avoid my old lovers so as not to upset my wife. There weren't too many of them, since, barring a couple of occasions when I happened to be in the right place at the right time, they were all former girlfriends, except for one girl from the building next door when I was in grad school. She could be called a friend with benefits now, as we got together several times to drink wine, hang out, make out, and more. I decided that old crushes that only remained crushes were okay, as long as neither they nor Tricia knew about my former feelings. Eventually, I found Hallie, one of my relatively few friends from freshman and sophomore year. She was a good friend as well as unrequitedly in love, but I was careful to make sure that our relationship remained just friends and not devolve into a romantic relationship that, from my past experience, would result in our friendship ending for good. So she played on my heartstrings repeatedly without even realizing it until we started drifting apart in the latter half of my junior year. By then, I was starting to have a lot of success with the other girls, and Hallie's slow estrangement wasn't too noticeable until it was too late. Since neither of us had ever entered the danger zone, it seemed to me that renewing our friendship with her as the adults we now were wouldn't be a problem. So I sent her a hello and a friend request, and then waited impatiently for her reply. When it came a few days later, I was quite surprised. "Tom Jarrett? I'm sorry, but I don't remember knowing anyone by that name. You must have gotten your wires mixed up and are confusing me with someone else." She had a very good sense of humor in college, so after the initial surprise, I knew she was playing a joke on me. "That's great, Hallie. You had me believing you for a second. How did you behave?" The next time I went back to the computer, the answer was already there. I'm sorry, I'm not kidding. I really don't remember you. You have the wrong person. What a kick in the teeth, indeed. Although we didn't spend much time together in our senior year, we had a few classes together in our freshman and sophomore years before she changed her major. I wasn't sure, but I figured she ended up needing an extra semester or two to graduate. Perhaps she really didn't remember the years we spent together, so I decided to send a little reminder. Remember when we went to the Delta Lamb party with Mark and Christy? Christy? Something like that? You twisted your ankle coming off the front porch and I carried you on my back all the way back to your dorm? We put ice on your ankle and you promised to give me a back massage when you felt better. By the way, I don't think I've been able to fulfill that promise. It was a whole week before she answered that time. I'm sorry, you have me confused with someone else. I've never injured my ankle like that, and I wouldn't promise a back massage to anyone but a very close guy, because that almost always leads to something. Please don't contact me again. Well, that hurt, probably a lot more than it should have. I spent the next couple days thinking about it, and then decided that since she sent one last message, I deserved it. Thinking that this might be crossing the line into creepiness or even stalking, I made it clear in my message that it would be my last, and I wouldn't bother her again. So I spent the next couple days composing and refining my message to convey exactly what I wanted to say while I went through boxes in the basement looking for what I thought I remembered. Dear Hallie, it's probably for the best that you don't remember me and that we won't be friends anymore because, truth be told, it would violate my wife and I's agreement that I avoid those who were once special to me. Although you never knew about my crush on you, I do know, and it would be strange for me to lie to my wife if she asked about the nature of our friendship. Or maybe you do know, and that would explain your reluctance to say hello. Either way, I understand and will not contact you again, but I pray you live a long life in happiness and good health. Your long-distance friend forever, Tom. I enclosed a picture I found in my college photo album, the two of us with friends at a party when we were sophomores. She could deny it, but that photo was absolute proof that we knew each other, and as close and casual as we were together, we were friends. After I sent the last message, Hallie never responded, and I stayed true to my word and didn't send her anything else. I put the photo album back in the basement and decided to be more careful about communicating with anyone Trisha might find unacceptable because of something that might have happened in our past, whether it actually happened or not. Although I tried to avoid reconnecting with former romantic partners, my wife did not. She ran into one of her former lovers the following summer while on a business trip to Chicago, and they reconnected then and even more often in the months that followed. Perhaps she wanted me to find evidence of her game, or maybe she was just being careless. But the trust built over nearly 17 years together was shattered, and with it our marriage. Susie was saddened by the breakup of our family, but she still loved us both and eventually came to terms with it, dividing her time between me and Trisha. We still spent a lot of time together, and I was happy to see her grow into an intelligent and beautiful young woman with great opportunities ahead of her. Since Susie actually lived with Trisha most of the time, and I eventually recovered from the initial shock of Trisha's infidelity and the pain that followed, I went through a period of sowing a fair amount of winter wheat, or whatever the term is for more mature people than those normally associated with wild oats. I even had a couple girlfriends in later years, but it wasn't long before I decided that clinging to plastic wrap was better than girlfriends trying to wrap a new husband in it. About 7 years later, hello? Hey Tom, it's Andy Reiner. How are you? Hi Andy. It's good to hear from you. I'm doing well, how are you? Andy and I hadn't talked much in recent years, but every Christmas we exchanged cards and a few notes to catch up. It doesn't get any better than this, my friend. Did you hear about the upcoming reunion? 25 years, can you believe it? Gloria and I are thinking about going to it, but we want to see if any of our old friends are coming. We don't want to be stuck at a table alone with a group of virtual strangers if none of our close friends show up. You know what I mean? Yeah, I missed our 20-year reunion for that very reason, I admitted, though it wasn't the only reason. It was shortly after my divorce, and I didn't feel at all like talking about it if I was going out with friends, and certainly not strangers. Do you have a guest list? Well, at the moment, besides me and Gloria, we have yeses from Mark Savone, Keith, and Gabby Schilling. He named about 10 or 12 people I was friends with, including Mark, who was my best friend and best man, and 3 couples, some of whom were definitely sure, and the rest of whom were contemplating but not yet sure. But that was enough for me, so by the time he was done, I had already made up my mind. This sounds like a great group, and I'm looking forward to meeting everyone. Sign me up as a yes. I'll go check in after we hang up. It'll be in October for the reunion, so we still have 3 months, but Gloria and I would love to see you there. Please give her my regards, my friend. I look forward to chatting with you soon. 20 minutes later, I was already signed up to participate, including some special events and the homecoming game against the Cats. That same evening, I got on the scale and set a goal to lose 10 pounds by homecoming. That would still exceed my college weight by about 15 pounds, but it would make me look really good. Homecoming weekend came, and there were 10 people in our group who had promised to attend. Mark and I were the only ones who were single, although Mark did so legally, having never married. Larry and Nina were on their second marriage, having separated from their first just a few years after tying the knot the first time. Keith and Gabby got married right after graduation, showing everyone else who was still in their first and only marriage how to do things. I was discouraged that I didn't make it either, despite my plans. There was a lot of activity on Friday, so I flew in Thursday afternoon, and a few people got together for dinner that night and drinks at the hotel bar later that evening. Mark and I were roommates sophomore year and have remained good friends, so we spent time together chatting with our group members and other people who came and went as the evening progressed. On Friday, we attended a few campus tours and seminars with a few of our friends. The campus has changed a lot. There are new buildings, new artwork, but in many ways it has remained the same. The plaza is still filled with pretty young female students flirting with young men, while many other people of both genders rush to class trying to make it on time. I remember those days, Mark said. You'd talk to a girl until the last second, and then you'd run to class. Yeah, they'd talk to you, I laughed. Did you see a note in the reunion brochure about a pizza place near campus? It's still there, but it has a new owner. I wonder if they've remodeled the interior. Remodeled? I wonder if the flavor of the pizza is still the same. We texted everyone in our group and met there for pizza and beer. Some of the pictures in the lobby were from when we were still in school, but many others, including athletes and celebrities who visited campus but stopped by to eat a slice and have a beer, were new. Unfortunately, it seems like about half of the reunion crowd thought the same, so the wait was long, but it gave everyone a chance to talk and relax. Josh and Stephanie told us about their recent European tour after selling the firm, and Gloria told us about her new book that is being prepared for publication. Mark was just starting to tell us about it when someone caught his eye, and he bowed out, heading off to catch up with her. It was Jane Myler, Mark's longtime crush from freshman and sophomore year. The others watched from the sidelines as 29 years after they first met, they finally found common ground. After pizza, which was delicious but not quite as we remembered, I headed off to a couple of afternoon activities alone. Mark never showed up for dinner, and neither of us saw Jane. I smiled at the thought that they might meet and reconnect after all these years, and briefly crossed my fingers for good luck. We ate well and talked, distracted only by paying attention to the big shots of the class making their speeches. It was business as usual. A welcome, congratulations to special guests, a fundraising speech, a reflection on our class, another fundraising speech, and so on. The people at most of the tables started whispering during the second or maybe third fundraising plea, and most of us ignored the speakers for the rest of the time. Eventually, they took the hint and fell silent, allowing the music to play. Afterward, I got up for another drink and set off around the grand ballroom, stopping along the way to talk to a few old friends. When I eventually got back to the table, I did a couple of dances with Gabby when Keith, who had gained too much weight, complained that he was tired. Then it was Nina and Steph's turn, while the rest of us watched. A little later, Gloria came over and gave me my turn when Andy, putting his feet up on the table, said with a laugh, "That's enough, woman," and sent her in my direction. The slow dance started after the first one was over, and I was about to take her back to the table when she stood up and we waltzed, leaving some space between us. She asked me how I was feeling as we danced. Her questions were unambiguous, but she said that she and Andy were worried about me and wanted to make sure I was okay. I appreciated my friend's concern, but honestly answering questions truthfully was a little depressing, so I walked her to her table and thanked her and Andy before heading to the bar for a drink. I got in line and was looking at the dance floor behind me when I saw Hallie approaching the line. My heart hammered harder than it should for a 28 or 29-year-old crush, but she was still as beautiful as ever, though clearly older. When she saw me, I waved at her and she smiled and waved back, after which her face became blank. I walked over and said, "Hi, Hallie. Remember me?" Her eyes dropped to the floor for a few moments. Then she looked up and nodded. "Hi, Tom." "Of course I remember you," she said, and opened her arms, inviting a hug. I wasn't about to pass up the opportunity, so I stepped forward and hugged my old friend for the first time in years. She felt good in my arms, and I leaned my head against hers, savoring the smell of her hair. Our embrace lasted a few seconds, after which she squirmed and relaxed for a moment. I took the hint and let her go in return. "How are you?" I asked. She looked around and then turned back to me. "Tom, why don't we get a drink and sit somewhere to talk?" "Alone?" We grabbed our drinks and walked out into the lobby, wandering around until we found an empty couch. "Is that okay?" "Of course it's fine," she replied, smiling. "It's so noisy in the ballroom, it's hard to think." "And Tom, I'm sorry, I need to think. First, I owe you an apology and an explanation." "You were running from the wrong man? Was it 7 or 8 years ago?" She nodded. "I'm so sorry, Tom. I was so excited when I got your first message that I started typing right away, but I stopped as soon as I typed your name." She laughed. 3 letters, T-O-M, was all I could say before I realized what it would mean if my incredibly jealous husband found out. Delete, 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 and each one hurt, and my heart ached non-stop for the next few days until I finally responded to say, "You have the wrong person." Then it hurt even more. "I'm sorry, Hallie, and I'm sorry for pushing you." I sighed before adding, "I actually thought, later of course, that you did remember, but just didn't want to rekindle the relationship because of your marriage." I would have realized that and left it at that. I should have, Tom, just admitted it and said we couldn't be friends now, but I had to. "Oh, what kind of term is that?" "Plausible deniability?" "Yes, that's exactly right. Plausible deniability in case Vince found out. We were going through some bad times at the time." "And things are good between you two now?" She took a deep breath and shook her head slowly. "There's nothing between us now. We divorced 3 years ago when our son was in college. It's like we live in different worlds. We only don't talk when something happens in Vinny's life. If he ever gets married, they may have to have 2 ceremonies so Vince and I can attend one." "Oh, I'm sorry. Trisha and I don't talk that often either, but we still try to keep a united front when it comes to Susie. She's in college this year and plans to become a veterinarian. We talked about the kids some more, but I realized that Hallie was uneasy about something." "Hallie, what's wrong?" "Tom, do you ever think about what might have been?" "Yes, sometimes, but I try not to dwell on what could have been but wasn't." "Why?" "What's on your mind?" "Remember when you sent me that note, the last one? You said you had a big crush on me?" "Tom, girls usually give some kind of sign about these things, something like that. But I never got anything like that from you. No hints. Or maybe I was just blind because we were such good friends. Anyway, I've wondered many times what would have happened if we had taken a chance and gotten together, even if just for one night. Hallie, you were a close friend to me, and I wanted to keep it that way. I hate to say it, but back then I had yet to grow up, and yes, I had a huge crush on you. But I was what you might call an equal opportunity crush during freshman and sophomore year when we were such good friends. I usually had crushes on half a dozen girls at a time before I started to realize that you shouldn't have more than one crush at a time in college. But that was okay for the first 2 years because it was rare for any of them to go anywhere." I chuckled, remembering some of the disasters. "On those rare occasions when it did happen, it usually wasn't pretty. So instead of risking losing you, I tried to hide my stupid crush on you, sometimes confessing to one of the others as a disguise to keep you in what modern young people sometimes call the friend zone." Hallie laughed. "Tom, I think that term is long established and perhaps even outdated." We both chuckled, but I wanted to move on. "Hallie, it doesn't matter now. If we're talking old hat, it's like water over a dam, under a bridge, and far, far downstream." Hallie looked intently into my eyes and shook her head slowly. "No, Tom, it isn't, and yes, it does matter. Take me upstairs to my room, or your room, and let's experience something new together. I've spent 7 years, or however long it is, wondering. Now I won't have to guess anymore." She didn't have to ask twice. I took her hand and we headed straight for the elevator. As soon as the doors closed, we found ourselves together on the bed. Several hours passed. "Oh, Tom, why didn't we do it then?" she whispered. "Why was I so blind that I didn't see it? And why were you so afraid to tell me about it?" "You bastard," she laughed. "Seriously, we lost years we could have been together." "Shh, don't say that, Hallie. We had our own lives, kids to raise, but it's not too late to start now to see where this could take us." Her eyes widened and she leaned in to kiss me. "That's so true." "I'm looking forward to seeing where this takes us in the future," she said. "But right now I'm thinking about the shorter term." "What do you mean?" "I'm wondering how long it will be before you're ready for it again, Tom." We spent most of Saturday morning in bed together and then had lunch and went to the game. Our tickets were for seating in the same section, and there were a lot of people there, so we were able to sit together. The game was as tight as the seating was, and at the last second, our defense stopped the game on 3rd and goal, winning the game for us by 4 points. As we were losing by a 7.5-point margin, there was much celebration in the stadium, and the homecoming crowd made their way across campus and back to the hotel. Hallie went back to her room to change for dinner, and I did the same before going downstairs to get her. After dinner, Hallie and I went to the class party with our friends. We chatted and danced for a bit before I caught Hallie's eyes. I raised mine in return and she nodded with a prim smile, trying to hide her desire. For the next little while, we said our goodbyes to everyone and then headed back to the hotel in Hallie's room. Next chapter. When I was in Dallas and she was in New Jersey, just outside of New York, we had agreed to a fairly permanent but casual relationship. But she insisted that we not formalize it or even fall in love since our daily lives were so far apart. Realizing this, I agreed, but told her that we would need to reconsider over time, as I knew I already cared for her and saw the possibility of more over time. Over the next few months, Hallie and I stayed in touch, communicating 2 or 3 times a week and exchanging text messages daily. But we still managed to see each other about once a month. Wanting to keep my Susie and her Winnie from finding out about us, we usually met at a neutral location where we could take a short tour and then check into a nice hotel with excellent room service and a nice bed, since that's where we spent most of our time. However, things did not work out as we had agreed. As our relationship continued, it developed, and soon I fell in love with her as easily as I had long suspected. Since we had discussed it beforehand, I didn't tell her about it, trying to decide what to do with my life and career so that we would have a realistic chance of being together all the time. Although I didn't want to live in New Jersey or New York, I was increasingly excited about the prospect of spending the rest of my life with Hallie, and I knew that living in her neighborhood was a sacrifice I would gladly make if she didn't want to come with me to Dallas or some other neutral city. In May, we met up in Charleston for a weekend getaway. Given that my flight was delayed on Friday and that we spent Friday night and Saturday morning making love, we hadn't even checked out of the hotel yet, so I wasn't sure if it was worth considering if she wanted to pick a neutral city. I pulled out my laptop and went through the list of local attractions I'd saved while preparing for the trip, in case I could talk her into going out. However, since it was the week before her birthday, I arranged for her to go to a spa on Saturday afternoon. Maybe she'll get some other ideas, I said out loud to myself. That wouldn't be so bad. The phone rang, seemingly in our room. The ringtone didn't belong to me or Hallie, so I looked for it, but it stopped before I could find it. I kept looking, but the sound was quiet and muffled, and I was about to give up when it rang again. Since I was close this time, after 2 or 3 rings I decided that it was definitely in our room and that someone had dropped it behind or inside the dresser, possibly a drawer. Continuing my search, I found it in one of the drawers, under Hallie's clothes. It wasn't Hallie's phone, so I picked it up, wondering who had left it and how she might not have noticed it when she was putting her clothes away in the drawer. Considering we were leaving on Sunday, she hadn't taken much with her. Since the phone wasn't ringing anymore, I decided to take it to the front desk, and maybe they could track down the owner after I confirmed with Hallie that it wasn't a phone for her work. I put it down and went back to the laptop, but a series of calls made me pick it up again. I couldn't unlock it, of course, but several incomplete text messages popped up on the screen, and while I was looking at them trying to find a clue, another one appeared. V, WTF are you? You're not at your sister's house? V, I had to lure her out, but Trudy said she didn't have you. Trudy? That was Hallie's sister's name. We didn't know each other, but Hallie mentioned her a couple times. You better be home when I get there. Call me now. A while later, I was still sitting on the edge of the bed, where I collapsed like that, when the door opened and Hallie walked in, practically dancing. Oh, Tom. Thank you so much, it was that Tom. What happened? She must have thought I was having a stroke or something, but when I held out the phone for her to see, the color disappeared from her face and she seemed to deflate before my eyes. He called Hallie. And he has been calling. I guess you forgot to turn it off? She shook her head in denial, tears streaming down her face. No. God, no. What kind of wicked game are you playing, Hallie? Letting me fall in love with you when you have someone else? Another lover? Husband? That's what it is, isn't it? God, Hallie, what have you done? If you're still married, you must realize that it can't be. Tom, no. It's not what it seems. Really? So this isn't your husband? The one you divorced? Or apparently the one you didn't divorce? Or did you just remarry and forget to tell me about it? She tried to wrap her arms around me, wrapping her arms around me as if wrapping me in her web of lies. I stood up and turned away, not wanting to touch her or let her touch me. Oh shit, Tom. Please? It's Vince, but it's not what you think. Really? I repeat incredulously. So the whole time I was falling in love with you wasn't a complete lie? I growled, trying to keep from screaming. And we're not goddamn adulterers, the lowest scum on earth like Trisha and her goddamn friend? Please tell me no, because let me tell you, that's exactly what it feels like to me right now. And it makes me so sick I'm about to throw up. And if I can manage to hold down my lunch, I'll think about walking out the door and never looking back. Tom, please. Let me explain. Please? Okay, but only because I love you, Hallie, or at least I used to. Now I'm not sure, but I'm all ears, so tell me the truth. No more lies. She sat on the bed again, clasping her hands together as if trying to wipe away the guilt that coated them like blood. The tears were still flowing, but at least she was looking me in the eye, saying, Tom, I'm sorry, but it's the truth, the awful truth. Vince and I had been having problems for a long, long time when you contacted me almost 8 years ago. Basically, we were still together because of Vinny, our son. I was in couples therapy at the time and he wasn't, and it went nowhere. Eventually, things got so bad that I realized I had to divorce him, found a lawyer and tried to do it, but Vince pulled out the prenup I signed 17 years ago and told me he would enforce it exactly. In the end, I'm going to get practically nothing. Sure, there'll be some money, but nothing like I'm used to. Then you are a gold digger too? No. Not in that sense. You see, Vince had a strict prenup, but he also had Rafael Bonadus, one of the biggest divorce attorneys in the state. You know, rich people who want to stay rich and famous? I got a young girl fresh out of law school who was so green and scared she probably peed her pants the first time she met Mr. Bonadus. When we agreed on what I'd get, I'd be a pauper again. Vince would be laughing his ass off, and Mr. Bonadus would probably be entertaining my young Miss Attorney. Although, given his reputation, I suspect that by the time we were done, he probably did. Damn gold digger, I repeated, convinced by her own words. And it looks like your lawyer is one too. Well, I guess birds of the same feather. No. Vincent DePrimo runs a big family business. Car dealerships, rentals, insurance, real estate, and the like. Divorce is bad for them. He's agreed to give me some freedom as long as I behave with restraint and give him a plausible denial. And that I'd be around to take care of his needs whenever he wanted. I've told him that I'm going to Sister Trudy's or to a conference or something. Since I'm gone, it gives him the freedom to do, well, whatever he wants during the weekend. But it seems like something happened this time. Yes. He needed maintenance, I'm sure. She made a grimace, recognizing with her facial expression that it was probably true, and I swallowed hard to keep from pouncing on her right there. I'm so sorry, Tom. I still want to divorce him, but I just didn't have the resources or backup to do it. I wanted to tell you, but I didn't want you to react that way. My lunch was safe again, at least for a few seconds, and I let out a sigh of disgust. Hallie, you knew how I felt and that I would react this way, but you did it anyway? What the hell were you thinking? If you had told me the truth from the beginning, we could have worked on this together and worked something out. Now I don't know. I'm so confused, finding myself loving you and hating you at the same time. I have to go. Tom, please stay. Tonight's the night. Let's talk things over, please. Hallie, I'm sorry, but as long as you're married, there's nothing to talk about. And as much as I hate to say it, if you divorce your husband and come after me, I'm not sure there will be anything to talk about even then. I thought you would become not only my best friend, but also my lover. But you've turned out to be a cheat, a liar, and a man I honestly don't know as well as I thought I did. And what's worse, I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust you again. No, I'm sorry, Hallie, but I must go away and think about it. She cried and begged as I packed my things, seeming to promise me the moon and stars if I would support her. But I knew I wasn't her dog, as I loved her despite the way she screwed me and her husband. 5 minutes later, I gathered my things and was on my way out the door, trying to ignore her pleading and crying. There was a huge hole in my heart as I flew home and in the days that followed. When we met again after all these years at the reunion, I knew from the beginning that I had a chance of falling in love with Hallie. It was even harder after we had met and made love so many times that weekend, but I tried to be smart and not let it happen. Considering how far apart we lived, I didn't even want it to happen, but it did, despite my wishes. Yes, I had fallen in love with her, and truth be told, I still did. But my world had turned to disaster and burned with the flames she had ignited, both in my heart for her and in the wreckage around me that threatened to destroy the person I had always thought I was. I shook my head, contemplating what to do and how to get through this with honor, dignity, and love. Or any other combination. Remembering that we had already committed adultery, I realized that there was no chance of honor and dignity anymore. On the other hand, love? I wanted to continue loving her, but I didn't know if I could even if she wanted me to. I was very angry with her and on edge, thinking about what we might come to if she decided to divorce her husband. If not, I knew I would never see her again. I typed a long letter to her, shifting my emotions into rational thoughts and transferring them to the virtual paper of the computer screen. It took a week of typing and retyping, editing and revising bit by bit, before I finally felt close enough to hitting the send button. At the end of the message, I asked her to contact me if she started divorce proceedings or if she decided to stay with her husband. If neither of those things happened, I would contact her again in a few weeks. There was no mention that this would likely be the last time, but if she couldn't read between the lines, then she wasn't as smart as I thought she was. Work became my life for the next few weeks, not so much because it had to be, but to take my mind off the problem with Hallie and the guilt of breaking the moral code I'd always followed. That all changed one weekend in June when Susie came to visit. "I've missed you, Daddy. You seem so distracted these past few months that even when we talk on the phone, I'm not sure if you're really paying attention to the conversation or if you've gone off into your own little world and I'm just a minor nuisance somewhere on the edge. What's going on?" She was right. I wasn't ignoring her, but because of the problems in my life, I wasn't paying as much attention to her needs as I used to. "Honey, your mom and I have always tried to teach you to do the right thing, but unfortunately, we haven't always been the best example. I don't want to go into details because it wasn't intentional, but I did something wrong recently and may have hurt someone else." She shook her head. "Dad, I'm 21 years old now, remember? When I got in trouble with 2 guys last year, Mom admitted to me that she made a bad mistake with you. You both tried to protect me from the truth when it happened, but Mom said I needed to hear it now that I was grown so I could learn from her blunder. Yeah, don't look at me like that. That's what she called it. And hopefully not repeat it in my life. I had to make a decision before I did something like her. I learned my lesson from her blunder and did the right thing. You're not going to take that lesson away from me, are you?" I looked at her, grateful that we had raised such a good girl, even if she was a little too inquisitive at times. She put her hand on mine and asked, "What's wrong, Daddy?" I wasn't going to share my mistake with anyone, especially my daughter, but it was a good life lesson for her to reinforce what Trisha had told her and maybe even help her someday. I took a deep breath and began. "I met an old friend, we became friends, and over the next few months we fell in love. And then, just as I was about to talk to her about making the relationship permanent, I found out that she wasn't as divorced as she claimed before." "Oh, she lied to you? And cheated on her husband? And now, even though you didn't know, you feel guilty about it. Don't you, Daddy?" Susie had always been smart as a whip and was due to graduate with honors the following year. She had just proved it once again. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I could add that she claims her husband is also a cheating scumbag, but 2 wrongs don't make a right, we finished together, proving that Susie too remembered this oft-repeated lesson from her childhood. Daddy, it was wrong, but it wasn't intentional, and you stopped when you found out, right? Yes, but I'm not sure where we should go from here. That's what you should be worried about, not what happened in the past. Like I said, smart guy. A few days later, I got a call from Trisha. Is Susie okay? I asked, worried about the unexpected timing of the call. Yeah, she's fine, Tom, but she seemed worried about you. She wouldn't give me any details, but I just wanted to make sure you were okay. Trisha, I'm fine. It's nothing. I should have shut up and maybe thanked her for calling, but we'd shared a lot over the years and it came out. I made a mistake recently and it hasn't been fun to live with. I'm sorry about that. Do you want to talk about it? No, I don't, I paused. Well, yeah, maybe. Can I ask you a very personal question? She giggled. We've asked each other a lot of very personal questions over the years. I think this is the first time you've asked if it's okay to ask. Ask away. When you had an affair, did you ever feel guilty? Wow. That's really personal and unexpected. I'm sorry. You don't have to answer that. I'll talk to you later, okay? Tom, wait, I want to answer. I was a big girl and smart enough to know that what I was doing was wrong and that it would hurt you and us if it ever came to light. Unfortunately, the temptation was strong, and I wasn't strong enough to resist it that first time. Once I crossed that line that I never intended to cross, it didn't make me braver, but maybe it gave me the strength to keep doing it. I knew I shouldn't do it, and yes, I felt guilty and dirty as a result, but I was getting an extra high and thinking it would be okay as long as I didn't mess up and you didn't catch me. In a way, it was a relief. But when it came time to pay the consequences, the price was much higher than I expected, and I'm still paying the price and regretting my choices every day. I am so sorry, Tom, for what I did to you and to us. I'm sorry for the trust I took away. Thank you, Trisha, for being honest with me. Now anyway. What's wrong, Tom? Why are you asking this now? You're not married, but... Wait, are you seeing someone who is? I was dating and we were very close, but then the truth came out, and now I realize I'm also committing adultery, though not willingly. Tom, don't blame yourself if you didn't know. I made a choice, a very bad and stupid choice, but if you didn't know she was married, you can't blame yourself for what you did. Yeah, I keep telling myself that. It's not working too well so far. Not if you don't let it. Tom, just remember that you now know what to do, and from now on you are responsible for any choices you make. That may sound harsh, but I've known you for a long time, sweetheart, and I know you'll make the right choice. As the days went by and I didn't hear from Helly, I started writing her a message to tell her how I felt, and that this was goodbye. Like the old movies where the guy tosses a bunch of crumpled notes into a garbage can, I felt like the garbage can on my computer would have been littered with my failed attempts if it weren't for the ability to edit on the screen without wasting paper. One evening after work, I was busy editing another version when the doorbell rang. A man in a very well-fitting suit stood in front of the door, and two other men, very large men actually in suits, stood at the foot of the stairs on the sidewalk and looked in my direction. Dressed identically, in suits that didn't fit very well, and with the same blocky facial features of a professional defensive lineman, I immediately envisioned a bloated version of the old Bobbsey twins. I opened the door slightly and said, "Can I help you?" Mr. Jarrett, my name is Vincent DePrimo. We've never met, but I understand you know my wife, Hallie. Pretty well, I guess. We need to have a talk. May I come in? Mr. DePrimo, I'm sorry, but this isn't a good time. Mr. Jarrett, I've come all the way from New Jersey. The boys and I would really appreciate it if you would take the time to invite me in rather than force the issue. Now. I imagined that Bert and Nancy standing behind him could easily knock the door off its hinges if he ordered it, so I said, "Come in, Mr. DePrimo." I opened the door and let him come in, then closed it behind him before the Boxey twins could make it up the stairs. If they kept going and banged on the door, as I knew they would, I'd have a case for home invasion, though I hoped they wouldn't, and that I wouldn't need a reason to try to defend myself. Or rebuild my house if I rebuilt it at all. Thankfully, he nodded to the boys as the door was about to close, and they nodded back, stopping halfway up the stairs. After a moment, the deadbolt clicked, and I turned to him. Please come into the living room and have a seat. May I offer you coffee, tea, soda? After a moment, I added, or perhaps a whiskey. A smile finally appeared on his face, which until that moment had been a mask of seriousness, and for the first time he looked a little relaxed. Scotch is an excellent choice, Mr. Jarrett. I walked over to the cabinet and opened the door, revealing a small bar inside. Pouring each of us a glass, I held one out to him and asked, What can I do for you, Mr. DePrimo? Is Hallie okay? He sniffed carefully at the Macallan in his glass and then took a sip. Very good, Mr. Jarrett. Thank you. And Hallie? She's fine, although she doesn't know I'm here. We're going to couples counseling right now after that prank she pulled. For 7 or 8 months, she used to tell me she was going to visit her sister in Ohio every month when she wasn't away at a conference. But unless you count the trip to Cleveland, April, I think, she hasn't set foot in Ohio or seen Trudy in all that time, except for Christmas when she came to visit us. He took another sip of whiskey, savoring it for a moment before letting it sink to the bottom. And so we come to the reason I'm here, Mr. Jarrett. I have one question for you, in your connection to her. Have you ever entertained my wife? He looked me straight in the eye, and I'm sure he knew the truth, but I looked at him as determinedly as I could. I remembered Hallie saying something about plausible deniability when she finally admitted her situation. I hoped she hadn't lied to me then, as she had on so many other occasions. I also remembered telling her, Mr. DePrimo, Hallie was an old and dear friend of mine whom I cared for very much. I was wrong about her marital status, but I assure you I cared for her and I would never, ever entertain her. I continued to stare at him, hoping he would believe my truth, because although Hallie and I had done it many times, I considered it a labor of love because of my feelings for her. Vince DePrimo stared at me for a long time before he finally picked up his glass, drained the last of the scotch, and set it on the coffee table between us. Good, he said. Now that that's settled, there's one more thing. For the moment, Mr. Jarrett, Hallie is my wife. And while we've had our share of problems over the years, I hope that will continue to be the case, and that you'll take my advice and stay away from her. If I hear even a hint that you're seeing each other again or communicating in any way, let's just say you won't like the result. If, however, she decides to get a divorce and take the financial bath she signed up for when we got married, then I won't care if you make love to her or entertain her. However, you should consider whether you really want to invest your time in a proven liar and cheater. If she cheats on me, her loving husband of 25 years and the father of her only child, just imagine what she can do to you now that she's used to cheating. He stood up and added, Thank you for your time, attention, and scotch. Now goodbye, Mr. Jarrett. I sincerely hope our paths never cross again. After he left, I had another glass of Macallan, and the deadbolt, for that matter, was back in place. It took a while before my heart stopped pounding and I was able to process the situation. I had been through a lot in the last 8 or 9 months. During that time, I had managed to fall in love with Hallie. During that same time, Hallie had repeatedly lied to me about her single life, completely excluding her husband from the picture presented. I began to hate her for what she did to me, to us, and to her husband. Although she claimed that he had cheated on her over the years, Hallie turned out to be a liar and a cheat, just as Mr. DePrimo had said, and I had no way of knowing if her claims about him were true or false. After reflecting on it, I realized that it didn't really matter if he had cheated or not. If he had cheated, as she claimed, it would be mean and give her reason to consider leaving him, but that didn't give her the right to lie and deceive him as she did. Also, perhaps more importantly, it didn't give her the right to drag me in and make me part of her lies. I was part of her tangled web, but certainly not willingly. No, I fell in love with her, but I loved the person she claimed to be, not who she really was, and that was like a knife in my heart. When I finally came to terms with it, I realized what I had to do. A few days later, an overnight package arrived at my office. Inside, on top of a stack of bound papers, was a handwritten letter from Hallie. Dear Tom, I'm sorry for the way things turned out, but I'm trying to make things right so I can move on with my life and give us a chance to be together. Enclosed in the envelope with this letter is a copy of the first part of the certified divorce petition, so you can see that it's true. Now I come to the most difficult part of this letter. Tom, I should never have lied to you and used you the way I did. I am truly sorry for that, and I promise I will never lie to you again. She went on to give her new address, phone number, and new personal email address before adding a long, loving, and very personal message that made my heart ache and brought tears to my eyes. After thinking about it all afternoon, with the help of a leftover bottle of Macallan, I opened my laptop in the evening and started typing her new email address until I stopped. Despite Vincent DePrimo's warning and muscle, what I had to say didn't need to be said over email or even on the phone. I closed the email and opened my favorite travel app. A few days later, taking the risk of sending Hallie a message via her new private email so Vincent DePrimo wouldn't intercept it from my new address, which I would likely never use again, I met Hallie at a quiet, secluded cafe in Newark. She fussed when she arrived and started hugging me, saying, "Oh, Tom, I've missed you so much and I'm so glad you're here. It took you so long to answer, I was really worried." I shook my head and raised my hand to hold her back. "Hallie, stop. Sit down. I need to tell you something." Deep down, she knew what was about to happen and shook her head pleadingly. "Tom, please? Don't do this, I'm begging you." "Don't." Her pleading hurt me like a stabbing, but I shook my head and went on with what needed to be done. I said, "Hallie, I loved you and I still do, but you played a wicked game with your husband and with me, using both of us because you didn't have the courage to do the right thing, to choose just one of us. Instead, you tried to choose both of us, thinking it was probably safe because we were so far apart that I would never get to the point of wanting to do it forever. However, I fell in love with you and was willing to do anything to have you come to me, or, if you wanted to, move here to be with you. Then it all fell apart, which was inevitable when a relationship isn't based on truth. I wanted to tell you, Tom, I really did, but it's too late for a but, Hallie. It doesn't matter now. You get the divorce you should have gotten before getting involved with me, and you lose the man who once loved you. But you do it so late that you lose me too, the other guy who loved you. No, Tom. We're going to make it work. You'll see. I'll do anything to make it work so we can be together. No, Hallie. You played this evil game and you lost. I lost. We both lost. She objected again, but I held up my hand and continued. No, Hallie, it wasn't my choice, but you fixed it so it wouldn't be. Now, no matter what we do, no matter how hard we try, we can't fix it, and there's no happy ending for us. I'm sorry, sweetheart, but this is goodbye. Her eyes begged me to reconsider, but I could read the determination in them, and she nodded slowly in agreement. I'm sorry, Tom, really sorry. I'm sorry I didn't think about it and do the right thing. I wasn't convinced she hadn't thought the right thing, but agreed with the last part and said, Me too, Hallie. Take care of yourself and have a happy life. Tears flowed down Hallie's cheeks and I walked away, hiding the tears in my heart. To my surprise, there were plenty of empty seats on the plane. Mine happened to be in the back, and there was no one at the window or in the middle seat to my left. I didn't pay attention to the safety briefing. I've flown the 737 so many times I could have done it myself, and barely noticed the flight attendant who came over to make sure my seatbelt was properly buckled. My personal belongings were stowed under the seat in front of me. My tray table was up, and my seat was in the upright and locked position. During takeoff, I closed my eyes, trying to put Hallie out of my mind, while visions of her seemed to float around me like one of those girls in countless episodes of 007 movies, beckoning me to join her once more. Excuse me, sir? Said the clerk a few minutes after the drinks began to be served. Can I get you anything? Water, please, I replied, looking at her. Blue eyes, cute smile, short-cut dark hair. She was beautiful and looked like a typical flight attendant in her uniform. I tried to smile. Nothing stronger? From the look on your face, I'd think you'd just lost your best friend. Yes. I broke up with her. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interfere. She handed me my water and walked on, and I went back to my thoughts and frustrations. Hi again, came the whisper. Service is over for a few minutes if you want to talk about it. About what happened. Since I've already intruded and all? I couldn't help myself and smiled slightly, more genuinely this time. Is the airline trying to add value by offering in-flight psychologists as well as in-flight movies? She chuckled. No, but you look so sad and then your words hit me. I did too when I realized he liked the status quo a lot more than I did. 5 years wasted. You want to tell me about it? Or tell me to get the hell out? Thanks for the observation and for the question. I don't think many people would do that these days. Lesson 1 in repairing broken relationships. There are still good people in the world. Thank you. And, despite some initial misgivings, I think I'm enjoying this value-added activity. She chuckled. Good, I'm glad. Since that's the case, would you like to tell me a little bit about your situation? To see if I can give you some great new insights into what happened to get you that kind of value for your money? If you don't mind, I mean. Yeah, that's fine, thanks. My girlfriend and I broke up for a while after I caught her in a lie. She tried to make things right, but I just can't trust her enough to turn our relationship into something permanent, especially after going through a similar scenario with my ex. What's the saying, once bitten, twice shy? Yes. I know what you mean. I was bitten by my ex-husband. I gave him another chance and bit him even harder when he cheated again. I learned the second time around. I'm sorry. Thank you, but that was 12 years ago. Somehow I got really lucky. It wasn't intentional, but I've been avoiding him ever since. Shit, we're on an airplane. You don't have anything to knock on wood with. She shrugged. I doubt it matters. I'm a little more mature and he's probably not. So even if we ever run into each other again for whatever reason, I think I'll just hold my tongue and walk on by. Oh, and I'll do the same with Benjamin, my steady boyfriend. While she went about her duties, it didn't take long as the plane was empty. To my surprise, she came back again, and we continued talking for most of the rest of the flight, lifting my spirits a bit and even lifting my heart. As we landed and the people in front of me began to exit the plane, I thought about what lay ahead of me and sighed. It's nothing like this. It hurts, but it's not the end of the world. You'll be fine. I turned and saw her standing in the aisle right behind my row of seats. I got up from my window seat and ducked under the overhead bins to stand right in front of her. Thank you. And thanks for talking to me. You've made what started out as a miserable flight so much better. My name is Tom, by the way. She smiled and held out her hand. It's nice to meet you, Tom. And I'm Cindy, we said together, and I pointed to her name tag. She grinned and pulled out a card. I never give these out, but something tells me you could use a friend. If you ever want to talk sometime, my cell number is here. I took the card and looked at it. Thanks, Cindy. Thank you too, something. And I probably will. We said our goodbyes and didn't see each other again after the flight out. I was on my way to the parking lot for my car when I set aside my small carry-on bag and pulled out my phone and Cindy's card. I scanned it into my contacts, then opened the message and started typing. Hi, Cindy, it's Tom from the airplane. This is my cell phone. It was really nice talking to you. I hope our paths cross again someday. I remembered Vincent DePrimo's last words to me and how ominous they sounded, but in this case they were just right. It was too soon, and I was in too much pain to say more, but by sending the note, maybe she'd remember me if I ever decided to contact her for real. I put my phone back in my pocket and continued on my way, walking out of the terminal into the sunshine. As hot as it was, I immediately started sweating and was looking forward to being inside, under the air conditioning. However, no sooner had I walked 30 feet than my phone beeped, indicating an incoming message. I checked it and read it. Cindy, hi Tom. Me too. Her short message warmed my heart more than the scorching Texas sun. Hallie was out of my life, but maybe sometime in the future I would find new love, perhaps with my new girlfriend, or maybe with someone else. I didn't have to be alone forever. The summer heat was almost forgotten, and I trudged forward with renewed vigor, smiling and looking forward to the future. A 35-year-old reunion, about 9 years later. With tickets in hand, I headed towards the bar. The one closest to our table had a long line, so I headed to the next one further down the hall. As I walked, I thought about how much everyone had changed since our 25-year reunion. Many had gotten heavier, many had lost their hair, many of us had many more folds in our skin, even if they weren't obvious wrinkles. There was a lot more gray hair, and few were white-haired, but some seemed to be fighting the aging process, albeit effectively, with hair coloring, hair transplants, and plastic surgery with varying degrees of success. Since most of our graduating class is in their 50s, I was pleased to see that most of those in attendance were still in pretty decent shape and enjoying life. However, a few people looked old, to say the least. Perhaps it was their genes, or maybe it was too much hard living over the years, but time had taken its toll on their appearance and, in many cases, their health, making them virtually unrecognizable from when we were together all those years ago. In fact, with the exception of a few close friends and those I had kept in touch with over the years, most of my classmates were now only distant memories, if recognizable at all. And then there were those who sat at a table in one corner of the ballroom, adorned, thanks to the fire warden, with a single battery-operated candle. There were the names of those who, for one reason or another, are no longer with us. Although it was no great surprise, Keith Schilling, always too heavy, was listed as his heart had finally given up, leaving sweet Gabby and their almost grown children alone. Larry and Nina Kilgrove, on the other hand, were killed in a plane crash when their four-seater Piper had engine failure and they couldn't find a safe place to land. Mark, Andy, and I were the three honorees at their funeral. Reaching the next bar, I found there were only a few people in line and stopped to wait my turn, observing people and faces, trying to recognize anyone I could before resorting to name tags for a reminder. Seeing no one familiar nearby, I turned back toward the entrance as the line for the bar moved up one seat. The guy in front seemed to have had a little too much to drink and started flirting with the female bartender, a pretty young woman who was a few years younger than my Susie, who now had 2 babies of her own and a third, presumably the last, on the way. Holding a glass in each hand, the guy turned around and I scrutinized him closely. He was definitely familiar, but I couldn't recognize him until I glanced at his name tag and saw his name and guest written on it. Mr. Jared, I was wondering if our paths would cross here. Ah, Mr. DePrimo. I'm surprised to see you here. He smiled. And why shouldn't I be? After all, even though she graduated a semester late, my wife was one of your classmates. Remember? My heart jumped at the thought. Hallie had divorced him when we were separated. Had something happened that forced them to be together? Or did they reunite after a while? Turning around, DePrimo shouted, Hallie! Come here. Come see your old buddy. No, I haven't heard from Hallie since I walked out of that little restaurant in New Jersey over 9 years ago. But here she is walking toward me. Her smile, which was always ready at a moment's notice, didn't appear as she approached. She glanced at Vince DePrimo, who nodded and then turned to me. Hey, Tom. I was wondering if you'd be here. Hi, Hallie. I didn't see your name on the attendee list, so I didn't expect to see you. How are you doing? Tell you what, you two had a good chat. I'll be here at our table. I'll observe. DePrimo nodded at me like he was king of the world and glanced at Hallie, who was relaying some message I didn't quite understand, before he headed toward their table just 2 or 3 tables away from the bar. Throwing a glance in his direction, I saw that he was looking at me as if through a telescope. Hallie looked at me and hesitated. I know what you're thinking. Why? I nodded. I wanted to leave him, but when you told me goodbye, I had to make a hard choice. It was easier to stay and feel comfortable putting up with his little affairs than to try to start over on my own. He's good to me most of the time. A hand touched my elbow, catching my attention. Hi, Tom. I was wondering where you were, so I came to see, Gabby said. Oh, hi, Hallie. I'm Gabby from our class, she said. Noticing Hallie looking at her name tag, she ran her hand down my forearm and added, and Tom's wife, of course. Hallie's look at Gabby and then at me was priceless, surprise mixed with denial. She said hello and then excused herself to go. I watched her walk away, wondering for a moment what might have been before focusing on what actually was. And it seemed to me on what was so much better. As we ordered our drinks, I looked at Gabby and thought about how lucky I was and everything that had happened. Not long after we met on the airplane, Cindy and I dated for a while and proved that there were good people in the world, but they weren't necessarily right for each other. It helped me move on with my life. When Keith died about a year later, I stepped in and helped a broken Gabby with funeral arrangements and spoke at Keith's funeral. In the time that followed, we maintained an occasional friendship, and I would drop in from time to cheer her up and occasionally be someone she could vent to. However, it wasn't until Larry and Nina's funeral, almost 3 years later, and after Gabby had already been grieving for a long time, that we really talked and finally connected. Unexpectedly close, we were married a little over a year later. As we were walking back to our table with friends, Gabby said, Hallie doesn't look happy, does she? No. No, I don't think so, I agreed. She played a mean game and lost, so now she's serving her time until one or the other of them dies or throws their hands up in the air, says screw this shit, and moves on. Since I don't think the latter will ever happen, I suspect they'll both live to be 90, just for spite, and to keep the other from having fun with what's left between them. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes, Gabby quoted with a chuckle. Or evil games, as you said in this case. Speaking of games, do you want to take a little break? I have an idea of what we can play upstairs to take our minds off her and everything else. We set Mark and Jane's drinks down at the table and said we were going for a walk, though I could tell by the looks in their eyes that they didn't believe it for a second. As we were leaving, Gabby leaned over to us and whispered, "We gave them an idea. They'll be right behind us, 5 minutes tops." Grinning, I agreed and said, "Then let's speed up so they don't catch up with us." Back at the hotel from the convention center, we barely had time to close the door to our room before Gabby was on top of me, showing me that she loved me and that thinking about the past was a waste of time. We undressed in a matter of moments, removing our clothes between kisses and gentle touches, and then we were in bed, eager for each other. Gabby climbed on top of me, snuggling in and against me, and soon I was entering her. With sweet kisses, my Gabby helped us grow even closer, focusing only on the two of us and nothing else and no one else in the world. Together, we went over the edge. Gabby let out a wonderful moan. I let out a long, grunt-like moan, and we both gave each other our best before she settled gently on top of me, and I wrapped my arms around her, pulling her close to me. "I love you, Tom," she whispered, panting. "I love you too, sweetheart." We lay like that, resting, for a few minutes before I asked if it was time for us to go back to the classroom party. Gabby shook her head. "I'm willing to stay here all night if you're interested. You know, instead of going down to the party, we'll see everyone from our group tomorrow at breakfast anyway." I guess you're right. Thinking of Vincent DePrimo, I added, "Yeah, we've crossed paths with enough people for today. The only person I want to see again today is you. Now, if you're ready, let's see how to untangle them." Gabby giggled and smiled, and I smiled too. Honestly, I'm not sure which one of us was smiling more, but I figured if I had to, I'd keep going all night until I found out. The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, so subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.